"She's calling the cops on me," my wife said calmly, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned toward the driveway and froze. There she was, our self-appointed neighborhood queen, charging toward us in a floral robe like it was a battlefield. Her phone was already pressed to her ear, and I heard every word she spat out. Yes, 911, suspicious military vehicle. Possible stolen valor. Could be dangerous. Her eyes locked on Morgan with this smug satisfaction, like she'd just discovered a terrorist plot in suburbia. I felt my pulse hammering as neighbors peeked from their blinds, watching the drama unfold like a free reality show. It was Morgan's first day home after 2 grueling years overseas. Our truck was barely parked when the storm hit. No introductions, no welcome. Just a stranger labeling my wife a fraud in front of the entire street. I tried to speak, but the words jammed in my throat. What was happening? How did we go from welcome home to being treated like criminals? And what this woman didn't realize, what she was about to learn the hard way, was exactly who she just messed with. The knock didn't just echo, it cracked through the quiet like a warning shot. I'd been pacing near the front window for hours waiting for this day. The day my wife Sophia finally came home. I had the house spotless, candles, lit dinner warming in the oven. After 2 years of deployments and video calls, today was supposed to be perfect. Then that HOA queen appeared. Her name, Eleanor Banks. And trust me, she wore her power like a crown no one asked her to wear. She didn't bother with a smile or even a greeting. Eleanor came storming across the cul-de-sac in a pink silk robe, phone glued to her ear, snapping photos of Sophia's olive green truck like she was the star witness in a federal trial. HOA violation. Section 4B, she barked into the phone while glaring at us. And possible impersonation of military personnel. Yes, I'm documenting everything. I stood frozen, gripping the doorframe. Ma'am, this is my wife. She just returned from Save It. She cut me off with a finger jabbed in my face. Rules apply to everyone. Parking military vehicles is forbidden, and pretending to be military, that's a federal crime. My blood boiled. Pretending Sophia had spent 8 years in combat zones while this woman waged war over flower beds. But before I could fire back, Sophia's voice sliced through the chaos, calm and controlled. Do you know what real authority looks like, ma'am? Her tone wasn't loud, but it silenced everything. Even Eleanor blinked, thrown off by the composure radiating from my wife. You think your HOA handbook makes you powerful? Sophia continued, stepping forward, boots crunching on the driveway gravel. But you have no idea what real power is. Eleanor's smirk faltered for the first time. She lowered her phone slightly, then raised her chin, doubling down. I've been running this neighborhood for 15 years. People like you don't last here. Oh, I plan to, Sophia replied, a hint of a smile curling her lips. It was in that moment, watching the storm gather in Eleanor's eyes, that I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a declaration of war. And Eleanor Banks had no clue that she'd just picked a fight with someone trained to win battles most people couldn't imagine. That night I barely slept. Eleanor's parting shot. Tomorrow the cops will know everything kept replaying in my head. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if we'd made a huge mistake moving here. Morning came with the blare of sirens. 2 squad cars crept down Oak Ridge Lane like sharks circling prey. Neighbors spilled onto their lawns, hungry for blood. And in the middle of the chaos, Eleanor stood proudly on her porch, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon. My stomach dropped as the officers approached, hands resting casually near their belts. Eleanor strode toward them like a hero in her own story. Thank God you're here, she said, voice trembling with feigned fear. They're frauds. She claims to be military, but has zero proof. I don't feel safe. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood there like an accused criminal while the officers turned to Sophia. Ma'am, we'll need to see identification. The crowd held its breath. Sophia moved slowly, deliberately reaching into her back pocket. She didn't rush, didn't flinch. And when that military ID caught the sunlight, the world stopped. Colonel Sophia Hayes, U.S. Army. Eleanor's face drained of color in real-time smugness, curdling into panic. The officers snapped to attention with crisp salutes, their voices dripping with respect, ma'am. And me, I finally breathed for the first time in what felt like an hour. What Eleanor didn't know was that this was just the beginning. For the first time in 48 hours, I thought we'd won. The cops left with handshakes and apologies. Sophia went back inside without a single word of gloating, and Eleanor. She vanished into her house like a vampire retreating from sunlight. The street fell silent, except for the whispering clusters of neighbors still buzzing over the spectacle they'd just witnessed. I remember standing on the porch that night, exhaling so hard it felt like my lungs were deflating. It's over, I told myself. But deep down, I knew better. People like Eleanor don't back down, they reload. The first shot came the very next morning. I opened the front door to grab the paper and nearly tripped over an envelope taped to the glass. Notice of violation screamed the header in bold red font. Reason unauthorized signage. The welcome home banner I'd hung for Sophia. Suddenly a crime against the HOA Constitution. I laughed bitter and low. One banner, I muttered, tearing the paper in half. But when I stepped inside, there was another envelope on the kitchen counter. Sophia held it like a live grenade. Apparently our trash cans were visible from the street for 48 minutes too long, she said, her voice flat. Fine, $85. By day 3, the floodgates opened. A new violation every morning. Vehicle overhang, 2.7 inches beyond property line. Exterior lighting, non-compliance bulb, too bright. Improper plant height, hedge exceeds 42 inches by approximately 1 inch. The absurdity would have been funny if it wasn't bleeding us dry. 10 violations in 4 days, $850 in fines. I started avoiding the mailbox because each envelope felt like a landmine. And Eleanor. She didn't just stop at paper warfare. No, she escalated. One evening, as I backed out of the driveway for work, her SUV magically appeared across our curb, blocking me in. When I honked, she waved sweetly, then pretended to take a photo of my license plate. Another night, we woke at 11:03 p.m. to the pounding bass of old rock music blasting from her windows. Not 11:02, not 11:04, just long enough to avoid a noise ordinance ticket. The pettiness was surgical. It didn't stop there. Eleanor began walking her tiny dog exclusively on our lawn, letting it do its business without so much as a glance back. When Sophia called her out, Eleanor smiled and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Dangerous people shouldn't provoke anyone." That whisper burrowed into my skull. Dangerous people. She was spinning a narrative, and I saw it unfold like a play. The next morning, I caught her in our neighbor's driveway, speaking in hushed tones, her hands carving shapes in the air like a magician selling illusions. Later, I overheard fragments: military, unstable, PTSD, just looking out for the kids. By the end of the week, Eleanor had launched a full-on propaganda campaign. Neighborhood forums lit up with posts like "new couple causing trouble, possible stolen valor," and HOA working hard to keep us safe. Safe from what? My wife planting flowers. Sophia stayed calm through it all, calmer than I was at least. She'd sit at the kitchen table sipping coffee, scrolling through HOA bylaws like they were enemy intel. "She's methodical," Sophia murmured one night, her voice low, almost admiring. "She's studying our patterns, looking for weaknesses." "Yeah," I said bitterly, "and she's finding plenty." What I didn't know then, what sent a chill through my bones later, was that Eleanor wasn't just improvising. She was preparing something bigger. I saw the proof one evening through the slats of our blinds. Her living room lights glowed like a command center, papers spread across her table in neat, obsessive rows. A binder thick as a law book sat open in front of her. She was writing notes with the precision of a trial attorney. And then I noticed the heading on the page scrawled in big black letters: "Emergency HOA Session Termination Review." Termination of what of us? Eleanor wasn't just trying to fine us into submission anymore. She was planning to erase us from the neighborhood completely. By day 10, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a bunker. Every creak made me flinch. Every car door slamming outside sent my pulse spiking. I wasn't living, I was surviving. I'd stopped opening blinds. The curtains stayed drawn, a flimsy barrier between us and her. Eleanor's presence was everywhere. The HOA notices the late-night music attacks, the whispers I overheard on my way to the mailbox. They gnawed at my sanity. Sleep became a joke. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening for the click of a camera shutter outside. Some nights I swore I heard her voice in my head. "People like you don't last here." One evening I sat hunched at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of violation letters. The red stamps. Final notice pay immediately felt like bloodstains. My hands trembled as I stacked them, trying to make sense of the chaos. Maybe we should just pay, I muttered. My voice cracked like old wood. Sophia looked up from her laptop, eyebrows lifting slightly. Pay what, all of it? The fines, the fees, whatever it takes. Show her we're not trying to fight. I swallowed hard. If we cooperate, maybe she'll stop. Sophia closed the laptop slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke calm but sharp as a blade. Do you hear yourself, Ryan? You want to surrender to a woman with a clipboard? She's not just a woman with a clipboard, I snapped louder than I meant to. She's relentless. She's got the HOA in her pocket. The neighbors believe her lies. We can't win this, Soph. She stared at me for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of command. I've faced insurgents who planted bombs under roads. I've negotiated with warlords holding civilians at gunpoint. And you think I'm going to bow to Eleanor Banks because she knows how to fill out a complaint form? Her words hit me like a slap. This isn't a war zone, I said weakly. Wrong, Sophia replied, leaning forward, eyes burning with quiet fire. It's exactly that. Psychological warfare. She's counting on us to crack. And guess what? You're giving her exactly what she wants. I looked down, shame curling in my gut. I'm just tired, Soph. Tired of feeling hunted in my own damn house. Her hand touched mine firm and steady. Then stop being the prey. That night I watched something shift in her. Sophia disappeared into the home office and came back an hour later, carrying a legal pad and a flash drive. She dropped them on the table with the precision of a field officer laying out a battle map. What's that? I asked. Operation Oak Ridge, she said, like the name alone was enough to make sense of the madness. I blinked. You're naming this? Of course, she replied without a hint of irony. Every mission needs a name. The legal pad was already covered in bullet points. Document everything. Track timelines. Compile photographic evidence. Cross-reference bylaws. Sophia's plan wasn't just a response, it was a counteroffensive. She'd been digging through HOA regulations, highlighting inconsistencies, noting every infraction Eleanor herself had committed. The woman who prided herself on being the enforcer, she was knee-deep in violations. Illegal signage, improper waste disposal, even parking within 10 feet of a hydrant. Sophia had it all documented. She's using the system to crush us, Sophia said, tapping her pen like a drumbeat. So we're going to weaponize the same system against her. Legally, strategically, relentlessly. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. It wasn't just determination, it was the confidence of someone who had led soldiers through chaos and lived to tell the tale. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, no, not yet, but something close to hope. Sophia slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a photo of Eleanor mid-scream, jabbing her finger toward our house like a dictator condemning traitors. Rule number 1 of warfare. Sophia said, her lips curling into a smile that made me both proud and slightly terrified. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. And Eleanor, she's about to learn what happens when you pick the wrong fight. I looked at her notes, the color-coded files, the sheer precision of her strategy. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel like a victim. Operation Oak Ridge, I repeated slowly. What's the objective? Sophia's eyes locked on mine. Simple, she said. Neutralize the threat. Permanently. Outside the street was quiet. Too quiet. I caught a glimpse of Eleanor's silhouette pacing behind her. Blinds, the glow of her laptop casting sharp lines across the curtains. Whatever she was planning, she thought she was in control. She had no idea the real war had just begun. Sophia didn't just plan, she executed. Every morning for the next 7 days, she moved like a ghost through our neighborhood, documenting everything Eleanor had built her petty empire on. She crouched near fire hydrants with her phone snapping photos of Eleanor's SUV, parked well inside the restricted zone. She filmed late-night videos of Eleanor's windows glowing while rock music blasted past 11 p.m. The HOA's own noise ordinances scrolling like subtitles across the bottom of the screen. By the end of the week, Sophia's intel board looked like something out of a crime drama, color-coded timelines, cross-referenced citations, even a map with pins, marking every violation Eleanor had committed. My favorite piece of evidence: a security cam still frame of Eleanor sneaking out at 5:43 a.m. to dump her trash into our bin, an explicit HOA violation she'd written us up for just days earlier. When I asked how she managed to get that shot, Sophia just smirked. Let's just say some of the neighbors are tired of living under her surveillance. And then came the call, emergency HOA session, mandatory attendance. Eleanor had made her move. The email was a masterpiece of faux professionalism, dripping with phrases like community safety and preserving neighborhood harmony. But the subtext was clear: she wanted us gone. The meeting was set for 6 p.m. Thursday at the community center. I barely ate all day. Eleanor had spent years curating her image as the guardian of Oak Ridge Estates. She'd stacked the board with loyalists, manipulated timelines, and controlled the narrative. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a tribunal. When we walked in, I could feel the temperature drop. 25 neighbors filled the folding chairs, their murmurs slicing through the tense air. At the front, Eleanor sat poised like a queen at court, her pink silk blouse glowing under the fluorescent lights. Her briefcase lay open, brimming with color-coded folders and glossy photos. Ryan. Sophia, she said with a saccharine smile that barely hid the venom beneath. So glad you could join us. I trust you've reviewed the allegations. Looking forward to addressing them, Sophia replied, voice smooth as glass. Eleanor started her presentation with all the confidence of a seasoned prosecutor. She projected slides filled with dramatic captions. Military vehicle violates Section 4B. Multiple noise complaints documented intimidation of residents. Every photo had been staged for maximum impact. Angled shots of Sophia's truck blurred silhouettes meant to look menacing. By the time she finished, the room was thick with unease. Heads nodded. Whispers buzzed. I could practically hear the verdict forming. These newcomers are trouble. Does the accused wish to respond? One of the board members asked, his tone teetering on boredom. Sophia stood slowly like she had all the time in the world. She carried nothing but a manila folder, no posters, no props, no theatrics. Just calm, controlled confidence. Thank you, she said, stepping to the projector. I'd like to present a few facts. The first video hit like a grenade. Eleanor in full view of the camera, lifting our trash lid and dumping in 2 hefty bags. Timestamp 5:43 a.m. A low ripple of laughter spread through the room. Slide 2, Eleanor's SUV blocking a fire hydrant hazard, lights blinking. Slide 3, Eleanor's own hedge towering at 46 inches, 4 inches higher than the regulation she'd nailed us for. Each click of the remote peeled back another layer of hypocrisy. Noise complaints, Sophia had security footage proving she wasn't even home during one alleged violation. In fact, Sophia added coolly, I was giving a presentation at Fort Bragg that morning. Here's my clearance log. Gasps, murmurs. The tide was shifting, but the kill shot came last. Sophia displayed a chart comparing complaint patterns, 18 violations filed against us in 14 days versus 3 for the entire neighborhood in the same period, all processed with suspicious speed. Then came the phone records, 47 calls to city agencies in 2 weeks, all traced to Eleanor's number. This, Sophia concluded, isn't community protection. It's targeted harassment. A personal vendetta carried out under the guise of HOA authority. The room erupted not with applause, but with something better: outrage. Neighbors whispered furiously, some glaring at Eleanor like they'd just discovered a traitor in their ranks. A board member cleared his throat. Mrs. Banks, do you have an explanation for this behavior? Eleanor's composure cracked like a cheap vase. This is character assassination, she shrieked, slamming her palm on the table. They're manipulating evidence. They're using military intimidation tactics, ma'am, the chairman said sharply. Please sit down. But Eleanor didn't sit. She lunged for the projector, ripping at the cords like a wild animal. 2 board members restrained her as she screamed about conspiracies and corruption. And in that moment, watching the Queen of Oak Ridge unravel in front of her loyal subjects, I realized something: Sophia hadn't just leveled the playing field. She'd burned it to the ground. The board called a recess to review the evidence. But from the looks on their faces, the verdict was already written. Eleanor had spent years building her empire of fear. Sophia dismantled it in 30 minutes flat. When the chairman finally spoke, his voice was cool and clipped. All violations against the Hayes family are hereby dismissed, effective immediately. The words hit me like oxygen after drowning. Eleanor's face pure devastation. But the board wasn't done. Mrs. Banks, the chairman, continued. You are fined $500 for abuse of the complaint system. One more infraction, and your position on this board will be permanently revoked. The room buzzed like a hornet's nest. And Sophia. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just packed her folder, nodded once, and whispered to me as we walked out. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1. My heart skipped. If this was just the beginning, what the hell did she have planned for Phase 2? The drive home from the HOA meeting felt surreal. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but it was Sophia who had been in control all night. She dismantled Eleanor with the precision of a surgeon, leaving nothing but shreds of authority behind. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. We did it, I whispered as we pulled into the driveway, the word we tasting strange on my tongue. Because if I was honest, it wasn't we, it was her. She carried us through this war. Sophia glanced at me with a faint smile. Phase 1, she repeated like a general, reminding her lieutenant the campaign wasn't over. That night I slept for 6 straight hours, a luxury I hadn't known in months. But peace, I learned, is a fragile illusion. On day 2 after the meeting, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No more violation notices. No more HOA emails. No more music blasting at 11:03 p.m. Eleanor's house, once the nerve center of control, now looked like a dead fortress, curtains drawn tight, blinds sealed shut. At first I celebrated the silence. Then it started to feel wrong. Because Eleanor wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat. She was the kind who turned defeat into doctrine. By day 4, I noticed small things. The glint of binoculars in her upstairs window. A car idling across the street longer than it should. Once, when I stepped outside to water the plants, I felt her eyes on me so sharp it was almost physical. Sophia saw it too. She didn't panic. She analyzed. She's not done, she murmured one evening, sipping tea like she had all the time in the world. People like her don't vanish. They regroup. I stared at her, waiting for the next move. So what now? Another meeting? Another slideshow? Sophia's smile was calm, almost chilling. No. Now we wait. And while we wait, we build leverage. Her confidence sparked something in me, something that had been buried under weeks of fear and humiliation. I realized how pathetic I'd become, jumping at every sound, wishing for escape, ready to surrender my home. I hated that version of myself, so I changed. The next morning, I joined Sophia on her runs, not because I loved jogging at dawn, but because I refused to let Eleanor own my schedule. I started greeting neighbors again, shaking hands, cracking jokes, rebuilding the human connections Eleanor had poisoned. When Sophia documented HOA bylaws, I sat beside her, highlighting key sections like a soldier studying field orders. Each small act was a rebellion, a declaration that I was done being prey. One night as we reviewed Eleanor's latest slip-ups, a trash bin left out 18 hours too long, a broken garden light ignored for days, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked different, not hardened exactly, but no longer the man who once whispered, maybe we should just pay. I get it now, I told Sophia. Why you fight so hard? It's not about rules or fines, it's about control. She nodded slowly, eyes meeting mine, with a flicker of pride. And freedom, she added softly. Never give that up, not to a dictator in a pink blouse, not to anyone. That night I slept with the blinds open. A dare, not a defense. But the calm didn't last. On day 7, I woke to an unfamiliar sound, a moving truck rumbling down Oak Ridge Lane. I leaned out the window and saw it stop right next door to Eleanor's house. 2 people hopped out, a muscular driver and a young woman with a smile so bright it cut through the morning haze. She waved at the neighbors as if she'd lived here forever, her energy a jarring contrast to the Cold War that had gripped this street for months. Sophia appeared beside me, arms crossed. Interesting timing, she said. I frowned. You think Eleanor's selling running away? People like Eleanor don't run, Sophia said, her voice low. They adapt. The question is, what role does this new neighbor play in her plan? As the woman laughed with the movers, sunlight glinting off something metallic on her wrist, maybe a badge, a chill swept through me. For weeks, I'd thought Eleanor was the biggest threat on this street. Now I wasn't so sure. The moving truck didn't just deliver furniture, it delivered tension. All day I caught Eleanor's curtains twitching as the new neighbor, a woman in her early 30s, unloaded boxes with effortless energy. She had that easy smile, the kind that makes people trust her without question. Her name, we'd later learn, was Sophie Martinez. She introduced herself that afternoon, knocking on our door with a plate of cookies like something out of a Hallmark movie. "Hi, just moved in next door," she said, gesturing toward Eleanor's house. "Thought I'd say hello." Her voice was warm, her grip firm, and yet something about her gaze felt sharper than it should. Observant, calculating. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," Sophia said smoothly, masking any suspicion. As Sophie chatted, I noticed Eleanor lingering on her porch, pretending to prune a bush that didn't need pruning. Her eyes darted between us like a hawk tracking prey. That night over dinner, Sophia mused aloud. "Sophie's too. Perfect," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "People don't move in next to Eleanor Banks without hearing rumors, and yet she seems completely unfazed." "Maybe she's just friendly," I offered weakly. Or maybe, Sophia countered, she's here for a reason. The answer came a week later, and it detonated like a bomb. Eleanor predictably resumed her campaign of petty tyranny, this time targeting Sophie. First came the citations: flower bed exceeds property line by 6 inches. Then vehicle parked in the same spot for 17 hours. Finally, my favorite, excessive humming during gardening noise complaint. But Sophie didn't react like the others. No anger, no fear. She smiled, documented every violation with her phone. When Eleanor's dog relieved itself on her lawn, Sophie cleaned it up after snapping photos. When Eleanor staged another HOA ambush, Sophie showed up in workout gear, cheerful as ever, calmly jotting notes. It was psychological jujitsu, and Eleanor didn't even realize she was being flipped. Then came the Sunday call. I was pruning the hedges when Sophie answered her phone on speaker, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "Hi, Dad," she said brightly. "Everything's going great. Very educational." My head snapped up. "Dad, what about the neighbor we discussed?" A deep voice asked from the other end. Familiar. Too familiar. "Oh, Eleanor Banks," Sophie replied lightly, as if reading a grocery list, documenting everything for the official file. Photos, timestamps, complaint logs, textbook harassment pattern. I froze, pruning shears limp in my hand. The voice spoke again, steady and authoritative. "Good work. Your mother and I are proud of you. Make sure everything is airtight for the report." "Will do. Chief Martinez," Sophie said, smiling into the sunlight. "Chief Martinez," as in Police Chief Martinez, the same man who'd responded when Eleanor called the cops on Sophia. The pieces locked together with chilling clarity. Sophie wasn't just a friendly neighbor, she was the chief's daughter. And judging by the meticulous way she'd been cataloging Eleanor's behavior, she wasn't just living next door. She was conducting an investigation. Through Eleanor's window, I saw it happen the moment the truth hit her like a freight train. Her teacup slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood. Her face drained of color. Sophie ended the call with a breezy, "Love you, Dad. Tell Mom I'll be home for dinner Tuesday." Then she turned toward Eleanor's house, raised her hand in a cheerful wave, and called out in a voice sweet as honey, but with an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "Beautiful day for community monitoring, isn't it, Mrs. Banks?" That single sentence carried more power than any HOA bylaw ever could. Eleanor disappeared behind her curtains, and she never came out again. Not for HOA meetings. Not for her so-called patrols. Not even for the neighborhood barbecue we hosted the following weekend, the first real gathering Oak Ridge had seen in years. As kids played in the street and neighbors finally laughed without fear, I stood beside Sophia, watching the community we'd fought for come back to life. "This feels good," I said softly. Sophia nodded, eyes scanning the crowd. Freedom always does. I glanced toward Eleanor's darkened windows, a strange mix of pity and satisfaction stirring in my chest. She tried to make our lives a living hell. Instead, she ended up under the watchful eye of law enforcement, living in a cage of her own making. People like Eleanor believe power comes from rules and fear. But tonight, as smoke from the grill curled into the summer sky and laughter rolled down Oak Ridge Lane, I realized the truth. Real power is living without fear, and we'd reclaimed ours. Power isn't about control, it's about character. Eleanor believed rules gave her dominance, but all they gave her was isolation. She thought intimidation could maintain order, but fear is a brittle weapon. It cracks under truth. When Sophia stood in that meeting room, calm and unshaken, she proved something Eleanor could never understand. Authority isn't loud. It's steady. It's earned through integrity, not manufactured through fear. This story reminded me that freedom is fragile when we hand it to people who thrive on control. Sometimes the enemy isn't the loudest voice, it's the one hiding behind policy weaponizing structure to feed ego. But the flip side is powerful. One person prepared and principled can dismantle a kingdom of tyranny without raising their voice. The real victory wasn't fines or meetings. It was neighbors stepping outside again, kids laughing in the street, and a community remembering what peace feels like. True strength isn't enforcing rules. It's creating an environment where no one needs to fear them. If you ever face an Eleanor in your life, a boss, a neighbor, a colleague, don't default to fear or flight. Document everything. Facts are your best weapon because bullies crumble when truth enters the room. Learn the rules they cling to so tightly and use those same rules to hold them accountable. But beyond strategy, remember this: boundaries matter. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Never confuse keeping the peace with surrendering your dignity. Sometimes the boldest act of resistance is staying calm, refusing to engage in petty wars, and striking only when the truth is unassailable. When someone tries to control you, take a lesson from Sophia. Preparation, patience, and purpose always win.